Okay, welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm going to do a little bit of setup of our topic today. I'm going to introduce our two other panelists, and then we're going to dig into it. So our topic today is unlocking growth, making fractional executives work. Again, I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm a leadership coach. I help companies with scaling and exiting. I've got two great panelists today. Let me introduce them. First up, John Lane. John is founder of DBA JTL, and he's a leadership expert, helps companies align and engage their teams to drive productivity, reduce turnover. He specializes in communication, decision-making, and team performance. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It sounds so much better when you say
it. I've got practice.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Vinay Raman. He is CEO of Carmo, is a specialist in business alignment, AI-driven insights, and he helps leaders uncover hidden gaps in their teams, creates measurable strategies for improving engagement, performance, and revenue. Vinay, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I agree, John. It sounds so much better when Bruce says it.
It's all the microphone. So just a note for our audience here. So we are streaming live on LinkedIn. And so there's a comment box there. If you want to leave comments, we'll try to watch that. We'll kind of catch things and integrate them into the conversation here if we see it. Also, we're streaming on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, go over to LinkedIn, put in comments. We're not going to be watching comments on YouTube, but throw over there. And also, if you're watching the replay on either of those platforms, we will be watching comments on LinkedIn for the next several weeks here. So if you have a question and you're watching the replay, go ahead and throw it into the comments. We'll catch it there, and we'll try to respond to it as quickly as we can. So that is our topic. Those are our guests. Let's get into it. So first question that I'll just kind of use to kick off, and I'll have you each kind of give your take on this. But what is just the biggest misconception leaders have about hiring fractional executives? Like, what is it that you see people get stuck on, or you feel that just blocks them from really seeing the power or the effectiveness of fractional executives? John, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Vinay.
Great. I would say the answer comes from the size of the company. So you have, and let's say it's, I don't know, N million to 10 million, something like that. Oftentimes it's a family-run business. $10 million is pretty freaking successful. And the owner is just kind of resistant, like, hey, I've always done it this way. I've always done it myself. And I don't need the help. And then you get to slightly larger companies. It's oftentimes it's turf and budget.
Yeah.
Right.
But now your take.
Yeah, I think you'll hear maybe as sort of recurring theme in terms of my perspective is this idea of alignment. Lots of times people will bring in, or I see people will bring somebody else in expecting them to be able to solve some magic and bring a magic pill to the table.
Yeah.
But there's not alignment in terms of what that person they're bringing in from the outside and what the actual definition of what that end game is. So they're kind of setting them up for marginal success at best by not communicating very clearly where they're trying to go. But I think kind of touching on what you're saying, John, right, based on the size of the organization and how they're setting it up.
It's still resistance, and I still think it's hard for an outsider to convince somebody who is arguably successful that they need help. And so when there's objective data available, and Vinay will absolutely get to that, it helps depersonalize it. It helps the decision maker not go through the shame or blame phase.
Yeah.
Because it's not about either. It's about actually bringing some expertise that doesn't exist in the company into the company for mutual success.
Yeah. So there's two things I'd love to kind of dig in on that. One is the financial side, and I definitely see this where founders, particularly kind of founders who, they're very concerned about money, right? Like it's been their money. They own the company. It's been oftentimes they've invested a lot of money into getting to a company certain point. So budgets become an issue. And, the fact is a good fractional executive is going to be expensive, sometimes very expensive. Yeah. And they'll often look at that number, they'll extrapolate it to an annual salary, and they'll say, why am I paying $500,000, $800,000, for this person? And helping them kind of do the calculus of, okay, well, you're not spending that much, right? You're having 10 hours a week or 5 hours a week or some fractional amount. And on an hourly rate, if you extract it, but otherwise you're hiring, say you're hiring a $250,000 executive, right? Like if you can hire a fractional for say 50, 75, maybe 100 for the year. And then you take that 150 and you can then invest in junior resources or other ways to leverage like that calculus sometimes is hard for leaders. How do you sort of see or help leaders kind of figure out that pricing or that kind of investment case for hiring fractionals?
John, I'll go first on this one. I mean, someone told me a phrase a long time ago. It costs you twice as much to hire an amateur, and basically what it does is they're learning on your dime. At the end of the day, I don't want someone learning on my dime. I mean, if I'm thinking in terms of using the analogy of, I want the hired gun. I want the best sharpshooter possible to do the job for me, and I think some of that stems from this risk-averse mindset. I don't want to take a risk. I want to bide my risk, and I'll just hire somebody, and over time they've got to learn it. As opposed to when I get a fractional, I get a person who's going to do this because they've got the experience, they've got the knowledge, experiential learning, and perspective, where they can do something in 3 hours that it might take someone else 7 hours to do.
Oh yeah.
And because it is something that is soft, sometimes immeasurable, that return on investment. That holistic approach to return on investment is not how they approach it. They kind of look at that the back end as opposed to from the front end. Yeah. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me. I'm always trying to look at the best sharpshooter possible when I'm trying to hire them, hit a target. Right?
There's some joke, and I'm going to get it wrong. Something about the plumber who comes in and like looks at the system and then takes the hammer and knocks something, fixes it, and does a bill for like $5,000. And they're like, well, it's like, well, it's $5 for the striking the hammer, and it's $5,000 for knowing where to hit it. Right? It's kind of sometimes this knowledge is invaluable. Like you could spend a lot of time and a lot of money and actually never get the solution in some cases.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I mean, someone told me the story of I think it was Picasso was walking on the street. Some lady came up to him and said, "Hey, you're Pablo Picasso," and he goes, "Yes, why, yes, I am." She says, "Hey," he pulls out a pen and a piece of paper and sort of does something very similar. She said, "Can you do a portrait?" He looks at her 2-3 times, sketches something on the paper and shows it to her. Say, "How's this?" She goes, "That's amazing. How much is that?" He goes, $20,000. She goes, $20,000. It took you 5 minutes. Same sort of story. He says, "Well, you're not paying for the 5 minutes it took me to do that. You're paying for the 30 years for me to get to the point where it took 5 minutes."
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Well,
John,
I got to have my anecdote story. There's a line that goes, "If you think a high quality fractional is expensive, wait till you try a low quality fractional," right? And so some of it, I think, is also just simply understanding or helping the leader understand that that fractional leader probably doesn't want to work full time at your company. So there's a ceiling of talent that you can afford to buy.
Yeah.
And you're much better if you can stomach 80,000, buy $80,000 worth of time from someone who's very good and very skilled and very experienced, rather than 100% of somebody at 80,000. So yeah.
The other one in there that I thought was really interesting is the mindset, and I've certainly run into this at times. I think I probably filter out my clients pretty well, and I don't get a lot of this, but every once in a while, there's this kind of, the founder, or the leader, it's like uncomfortable not being the smartest person in the room, right? It's like it's hard to kind of be humble enough to say, look, I'm going to hire a senior person who knows a lot more about me, and I'm just going to have to trust them a little bit. Like I may not understand everything, or I may not have enough to really get what they're doing and how they're doing it and seeing the value, but I know as a leader, I need to bring in experts at some point. Like I can't just figure it all out myself. Have you seen this come up, and how do you deal with that when a leader is kind of in that, I want to be the smartest person in the room kind of mindset? Why don't we start with you on that one?
Sure. Well, I mean, it is a shot to the ego when you like to be the smartest one in the room. And I got to tell you, kind of coming up through the school system the way I did, I mean, it was always pushed upon me that you got to get an A on every test, an A+. Anybody who gets anything less than 100 on the test is a failure. Well, guess what? 99% of the world is then a failure.
Yeah.
Right. But there's some expertise that lies there. So statistically, I mean, just using pure numbers, it's impossible for you to know everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I like to think in terms of multiplication as opposed to addition, right? Who can I get who is going to take sort of some nugget of an idea that I have and be able to make, I put $5 in, they can make $5,000. That's the kind of people I want around me all the time, because the meager amount of money that I have in my wallet, they can turn that into 100 or 1,000x.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for someone who can be an amplifier or multiplier of what I do, because they can get so much faster, just as we talked about sort of the all the three analogies we shared there. So for me, it's all about if I truly want credit, the credit I want is not for, I mean, Dan Sullivan wrote a book, Who, Not How. I don't want to be the one responsible or getting the credit for how it was done. I want to be the person for that one says, man, you were smart. I say this all the time. Hopefully my wife's not listening, but I'm the genius who picked her. That's the win, right?
Exactly.
So I want to be, notorious for being the guy who always picks the smartest person in the room, and somehow sharing that I was able to get them on my team, right?
Yeah.
I want to be able to get the Kobe Bryants and Shaquille O'Neal on my team, the Michael Jordans, the Scottie Pippens. Because then I become the Phil Jackson that everyone goes, oh man, that's a fantastic person. Right? That's the role I'm looking for.
Yeah. John, what's your take? Have you seen this?
First, I have to compliment Vinay for figuring out a way to tell everybody on this podcast that he was a straight A student. So, dude, awesome, humble brag. You really just slid that in, but I'm calling the penalty on that. There's a couple of things that I've learned in my solo career, which is I'm not for everyone. And when Vinay and I work together, we're not for everyone. And so there's just some owners, and we always want to crack the case, but there's just some owners or business leaders who, despite the evidence, believe they have it all figured out. And maybe we're not for them, right? And Vinay and I both tend to be more on the side of vulnerable leader. We care that success happens, not as much who created the success or how the success was created in some ways. And so there may just not, there is a percent of I'll call them owners, whatever, that you can't reach.
Yeah.
And then there's probably a spectrum of that, but I'll just go back to the way Vinay and I do it is with objective data. And most business leaders can handle data, even if it's different than their, held beliefs.
Yeah.
Not all, but many can. So
yeah.
that's how we sort of drill in to the situation.
Yeah. How would you suggest, I think it kind of comes down for me, and like, how do leaders actually, I think it's two questions. One is figure out what they need, right? Like how do they kind of self-diagnose their needs? And then how do they go about finding the right fractional to address those needs, right? Because I've seen both problems occur. It's like they hire a great person, but it's they're not really addressing the problem. It's the right great person for the wrong problem, or they've really identified what their issue is, and they just struggle to figure out how do I find the right fractional and engage the right way to actually, move the needle on that problem. Insights on those? I know you guys do a lot of diagnostics and have kind of approach to this. Give me your take.
Yeah, so I'll go first on that. It's actually something I focus a tremendous amount of time. Sort of what we've done as an organization is building a diagnostic that'll show that cultural alignment and misalignment in an organization. I've always loved personality indexes and tests. John does one of them, which I absolutely love, called OAD. But while personality tells you kind of how you operate, it doesn't sort of tell you the piece of how you fit in the role that you're operating within. Right? We all have an interpretation. If I come in as a CTO or chief operating officer or chief marketing officer, whatever the role is, right? Our conception of what that is and what the company is actually doing two different things. And the greater we can bring those things together, that's what we built the diagnostic. Then about 3 minutes, we'll show you how you think about how the rest of the team kind of thinks about it, and if there's alignment. So, maybe as appropriate, we can share that with the audience to do.
Yeah.
But being able to see that visually kind of disarms the whole process. We can start to visually see where there is alignment and misalignment, and it fundamentally shifts the conversation that you're able to have with people, so that, hey, the analogy I give people is if I went downstairs to tell my 3 kids and my wife, hey, we're going on vacation. One of them is thinking about going to Kenya on safari for a month because I had promised that at some point in time. One is thinking of going to Legoland. One is yada, 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 right? And the whole time I was just thinking about Disney World and wearing a Mickey Mouse hat. So that level of misalignment happens within every organization as tariffs come into play, as new presidencies, new economic factors come into play. How do you keep aligning that, right? And that's part of what this diagnostic does. So you can visually see, are people fully aligned, or are they actually completely out of alignment? John?
Yeah. Well, it's not a surprise that Vinay and I agree on lots of different things. So the other thing our diagnostic does is it shows the leader where there's agreement, right? And so the leader may think marketing's a 4 and marketing thinks marketing's an 8, right? There's a problem there. But if 3 other leaders think that marketing's a 4 and marketing thinks marketing's an 8, we always pick on marketing because that's our background. There's a conversation there, and there's
opportunity, right? There's an opportunity.
Exactly. I just got a LinkedIn pop-up that asked if the meeting started. Sorry, I'm breaking the fourth wall on this. Sorry, Bruce.
We should be good. I've got live on my side.
Oh, good. Yeah, good.
So you do the diagnostic. You figure out where the opportunities are, where the needs are. How do you actually engage? Like let's talk about how do you create your criteria for what are you actually looking for, or how do you find what you're looking for? Because there's a lot of fractional executives out there, right? And it's doubling every day kind of thing. How do you actually sort through all that? And what are the criteria you use? And then how do you actually go to market in terms of finding somebody?
Yeah, so I'll take that first, right? Everybody is on a journey as an individual on their professional journey. I mean, if you'd asked me 25 years ago, kind of what I was going to be 25 years from now, I had a concept, but the problem that I was solving was very localized, very parochial to where I was at that very moment, right? I'm only looking at that situation. I can't zoom out. So I can't give myself an objective understanding. And that's part of why, sort of built this really objective tool to kind of step back and say, compared to a large data set, how do you compare it to others, right? And what that allows you to see is that every culture has a custom set of needs, right? And how strong, like the example that John was given, everybody else on the team believes that marketing is a 4 out of 10. Marketing thinks it's an 8 out of 10. Well, how does the rest of the industry think about that as well? Right? If everyone else thinks it's a 5, well, that's a significant challenge for you as an organization because there's not alignment between marketing and the rest of the team. Again, we're just picking on marketing here. But I think that starts to give you or strongly influence your understanding of, hey, I got sort of this felt need of what my challenge is, but I can't get outside of the 4 walls of my organization to see if that's really true. It starts to give you I've always found, having been in and around the data and business intelligence states for a long time, data doesn't give you the answer. It tells you the questions to ask. And by being able to see that data, you go, wait, hold on a second. Why is my marketing so far off? Why is there so much disagreement? Yeah. And that starts to influence sort of the question you ask as, maybe do we need somebody from a marketing point of view to come in and give us some grounding, that sharpshooter, if you will, to harden our marketing processes or the way we think about it.
Yeah.
I also think there's a first order, second order, and third order thinking, and sometimes that's trying to play dimensional chess. But as Vinay said, the data tell us the questions, not the answer. And so marketing may have a problem that's due to something else, right? And so it doesn't mean beat up the marketing leader. It doesn't mean even necessarily you need a fractional marketing leader. It means you have a bunch of questions to ask, and it shows you where you can start asking questions, suggest some questions, because that's where the answer is, and then um, um, you'll kind of figure your way through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to kind of get on talk about, because I think this is sometimes a challenge, is it feels like a very big decision. Like, I'm going to invest a fair amount of money. I'm going to expose myself to a certain amount of risk and having someone in sort of tell me what to do, or potentially kind of mucking with my engine a little bit. Are there any ways to kind of de-risk this, or how do you kind of manage, particularly early stage of the process, to figure out, okay, are we going the right direction? Do I have the right person? Like, how do I make sure that I'm actually going to get the business results that I want from the investment that I'm making here? Any thoughts on how kind of the early stages, or, pre-hire, or so, the final selection process, and then actually, say the first 30, 60, 90 days of engagement, how do you evaluate things? Any thoughts on that?
John?
Maybe John, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, you go. You caught me. I'm getting pinged. One of my people wants to get in and he can't, so I'm freaking troubleshooting in the middle of a live. So
that's fine.
Busted.
Well, yeah. So here's how I generally approach them. I mean, I kind of use this as sort of a grounding element in terms of how I approach things. Two things I'll pair together here. Number one is when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, the news reporter comes up to him and says, "So how did you do it?" And his first response was, "I found 1,000 ways not to do it first." I think for me, that's a grounding element. And it kind of comes to this quote that I use all the time: anything worth doing is worth doing badly first. I've stopped thinking about things as winning and losing so much as either winning or learning as the two opportunities. That's it, right? There is nothing else. And not learning is you just basically giving up. If you understand the directionality in which you're trying to head, and there is no answers to go pull off of YouTube because somebody hasn't done it before, because they haven't done it for your business. You got to kind of learn what it is that you're actually asking. Yeah. And the only way you're going to do that is you can do it by yourself, which is going to take forever. Yeah. Or you can hire somebody who actually has gone through those same experiences and cuts, bruises, and scars, skin their knees, and learn it. And you can learn a lot faster, because ultimately, I believe that money just accelerates time, right? So you can take a year to learn it by yourself and stumble through it, or hire somebody else who's going to get you there in a month. And your thought is, well, hey, that costs a lot of money. Well, are you willing to wait a year? Because you can do it for a lot cheaper, but it'll just take. I mean, it's like me building a deck on my house. Technically, do I have the capability to do it? Yes, but I don't have all the tools. I don't have all. I mean, I've got to go buy all the lumber and yada yada yada, right? Yeah. I can go watch the YouTube videos, or I can hire somebody who can probably knock it out in 2 days.
I like that idea of that. I'm hiring somebody so that we don't make the 100 mistakes they have already made, right? We can start making new mistakes.
That's right.
The other one that I've used a lot, and it doesn't always work in this situation, but it works a lot more than I thought it would work, and that a lot of people think, is I call it horse racing. So I'll, once I kind of define this problem, I'll actually hire 3-4 people to do a first phase. And, maybe it's a couple weeks, right? Like it's some meaningful amount of work that tests the whole process of working with that professional in terms of, how well can they diagnose things? How well do we interact? What do their solutions look like? And the reason I want to hire everyone at the same time and then I'll pick, okay, after that one, maybe I'll even do a second phase where I'll take 2 of them, and then I'll take a final phase and I'll hire one for the full engagement, is because of that issue of time. Because I don't want to spend, a month or worse, 3 months with the professional only to figure out, it wasn't the right one. Now I got to go back to the drawing board. Now I got to go hire somebody. I've got to run through that. If I have to go through 3 or 4 options to be able to get the right fit, that may take me 6 months. And that's what's going to kill me. I'd rather spend more money, but within 30 days, pretty much know where my winner is, and then move ahead with that one. because of that time, not only the time value of money, but just the time of being in that situation can be quite painful.
I mean, John, I'll just jump in real quick second here. I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I love that. I mean, I might even put that even a little more advanced way of doing it. I think that is what I do.
Yeah.
Because as a individual, I'm constantly trying to figure out, as a leader, I'm trying to constantly figure out, am I asking the right question? Because brilliant people that I know, and I aspire to be like some of these folks, they ask one question like, man, that's so fantastic a question. It gets right to the heart of the issue in the first question. I don't know if I'm doing that right. It just doesn't feel like, gut feel doesn't tell me it's right. How do I get there faster? Hire 3-4 people to answer the question. I get to the end of it, I was like, no, these 4 people weren't asking me. They're not helping me resolve what I'm trying to do. That's not what I wanted, but at least I've taken that off the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I love that approach.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole, and I know it's been misconstrued in some ways. That's the whole fail fast mentality of a startup, which is, in a startup, the only asset you have is time. Now, money can buy you more time, as they say, but if you make a strategic decision to go left, what's the old saying? If you come for the king, kill the king. Go left as hard as you can and figure out if it was the correct decision.
Yeah.
And if it was, keep going. And if it's not, then you've learned a very important lesson very quickly. Don't go that direction anymore. Get it off the table. Choose another path.
Yeah.
But I think that's also a very enlightened leader. I think more of the stuff we'd run into is the more prosaic, like, how much does that cost? You know, it's just the mindset of the, I don't want to, I'll say mostly typical business owner finds themselves in.
Yeah.
And so you asked us earlier, how do you get somebody to make that decision to hire a fractional? I'm not sure we would still be in the room if we said, well, actually, don't hire 1, hire 4 and learn faster. That probably wouldn't win most of the time. But I think it is a good mental set.
But I think the key point that you're saying is it kind of depends. What do you actually want out of this? Do you want to be right? Well, you probably can do it by yourself, and it might take you a year to get there.
Yeah.
If you want to get to right, there's a shortcut to that. That hack is bring in all the expertise to be able to very quickly tell you, here's the better question to ask.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
When do you want to be right? Do you want to be right in a year, or do you want to be right in 30 days? One last thing, I want to squeeze it in before we run out of time, because I think this is the other thing that's really interesting about fractional executive, particularly with these kind of high growth company situations, which is, if I'm a $10 million company and I have a sales challenge, that's a particular type of challenge, and you need a particular type of executive to come in and really help you with that. But going from a 25 to a $50 million company is a really different type of challenge. And oftentimes I find one of the benefits of doing fractional is I may need this person for 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, but at that point, the problem shifts, and that might not be the right person at that point. And I need to be able to switch to the next level. And I've just seen this happen again and again, where they hire a full-time, say a salesperson or marketing, we'll pick on marketing more, a full-time marketing person, right? Crushes it for 12 months and then starts falling flat on their face because, the business has gone from, 10 to 25 million or from 25 to 50 million. And it's just a different game at that point. And I need to bring in someone else. And if that person is not, can't learn quick enough or can't evolve quick enough, like now I've invested in this person that it becomes actually a weight on me rather than an accelerator. Have you seen this? I guess, give me your take on that kind of benefit of working with fractionals when you're dealing with that high growth situation.
I think what you're talking about, like those high growth companies these days tend to be startups or former startups. And I do a whole workshop on this about helping startups hire properly. And exactly what you said is one of them. Startups tend to take shortcuts, or they don't have time, right? And so they make these hires that have a very low ceiling, right? And so the fractional way to go is a smart way in many ways. I think what founders fear is the loss of institutional knowledge, but that leader can leave anyway. And so we do plan to push a bit into that growth stage, startup phase, because you're right. Sales in 5 to 10 million, single channel, full cycle seller now goes to 40 million. And now you've got sales operations, revenue operations. You got all these different departments that your sales builder just probably doesn't have experience in.
Yeah. Vinay, your take on this?
Yeah, the analogy I use all the time is different, or a saying I use all the time is different processes fail at different rates, right? So your marketing may be good to go to 25 million, but your sales is only good to 12.8, for example, right? So at some point in time, you got to shift gears, and each one of these different disciplines within your organization have different gearing sort of ratios. Hopefully, I'm not making this too complex, but the concept is that it perspective shifts in each kind of disciplines or those dark departments in your organization, and it is worth considering what stage are we at and what is that level of maturity. Because if we hit full maturity in marketing, for example, since we're picking on marketing, is it time to get to the next level, which it's a brand new level of maturity. It might be time to hire 4 people to come in and say, hey, well, how do we get to that next level?
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just add one last thing. I know we're going to
last one
is I'm working with a startup now, and they have to do a bit of a reorg, and that's fine. But one of the pushbacks I have for them is stop title inflation, right? We had a client who was 4 people, 6 people, and one guy had a title like head of global customer success or something like that. I was like, who's more senior than that, right? And so it's really important that if you are going to hire full time, hire a senior manager of sales who can do that level, so that you leave some headroom.
Yeah.
So not really a fractional discussion, but more of a discussion.
Great conversation, gentlemen. If the marketing managers on here want to send you hate mail, how do they get a hold of you? John, let's start with you. Contact information. What's the best way?
So LinkedIn is always best for me, and I have a very simple name. Email is john.lane@dbajtl.com.
Excellent. And Vinay, what's the best way to get
mine in India, mine is a very simple name. It's but my email address, LinkedIn is a perfect way to find me. Vinay Raman at Carmo, or Vinay R. So first, last name initial at carmo.com.
Excellent. If people want to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com. Eckfeldt.com is my URL, and obviously LinkedIn. Gentlemen, thank you for the conversation today. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.